Good afternoon and welcome to Business as Usual. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I'm joined today by Ryan Gent on our team, who oversees business development. He will be helping in terms of questions and interactions. So a little bit about today's call for some of you who haven't been on the call before. It is a deep appreciation to both Huntington Bank and AT&T for their support of this entire series, which we're very thrilled about. And we're also very thrilled to announce that tomorrow we go live with Chris Franklin, who serves as the chairman and CEO of Essential, which is the newly formed venture that was created through Aqua America's recent acquisition of People's Gas. So we're very thrilled to hear about that vision for Western Pennsylvania. And on Monday, we're excited to be hosting Travis Williams, president of the Pittsburgh Pirates, no stranger to Pittsburgh and back from New York. And he is going to talk to us about the status of America's favorite pastime, which is baseball for most of us. So we're excited also about CNX CEO Nick DeLulis and Ken Broadband, business manager of Steam Fitters Local 449, two of the founding leaders of an organization which is now called Pittsburgh Works. So we are continuing to make sure that we're having relevant conversations for all of us. And today we are thrilled to have Representative Dan Frankel. Before I pass the baton to him and he joins, I've muted everyone's microphone so there's no noise, there's no background noise, and we appreciate that. And with that said, I also want the call to be interactive, and there's a chat box. So the chat box, Ryan, as I mentioned earlier, will be monitoring that and making sure that we have an opportunity for an exchange. Also, please do not use this opportunity for selling anything. That's not what today is about. So on that note, I am thrilled to bring on dear friend of many of ours, mine and the Tech Council and the entire tech community, is Representative Dan Frankel. So welcome, Dan, and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, so, thanks, Audrey, and thanks to the Tech Council. Really enjoy the opportunity to chat with everybody.
No, absolutely. First of all, I hope this finds you doing well and that you're safe and you're healthy. And let's start off talking about how you and your team are actually doing.
We're doing well. My family is doing well. My team, I mean, we are working, many of us remotely. I'm actually in the Capitol today. This is the second week I've been here in Harrisburg for session, but the previous 6 weeks I had been participating in caucus and in session on a remote basis. I think we were one of the first chambers in the entire state to use this process. I think that now you see Congress is adopting this proxy process as well. So I've spent a great deal of time, as I'm sure all of you have, on Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, having meeting after meeting. My wife, who's a psychotherapist, sees her patients, one after another in our living room remotely, and so it's a new world, and it's working, I think.
It is. It certainly is working. And so please tell everyone what area you cover, that you represent, so that we can set the stage.
So I represent most of the east end of the city of Pittsburgh, Shady Side, Squirrel Hill, Oakland, Greenfield, Point Breeze, and Regent Square.
Okay, terrific, terrific. And you have actually been in office for how long?
This is my 22nd year. I'm running for my 12th term. Primaries coming up. I don't have any opposition. I'm grateful for that, but grateful for the faith that's been placed in me by my constituents. So,
yeah, well, we're grateful for your longevity. So thank you for that. So over the past few weeks, our companies in the tech community in particular are working to develop their reopening plans. And one key aspect to the state's plan to prevent a resurgence of the outbreak is to implement a strong system for contact tracing. This is an area that you have been leading, you've been focusing on. So can you talk about that work and just give us the baseline and take us through the journey?
Sure. Well, early on, it's very clear to me that, the things that you need to have in place to reopen pending having a vaccine, pending having an effective therapy treatment for those people who are infected, is going to have to be to give people confidence that they can be safe, participate in the economy. The way that has been done historically, and we have, pandemics, epidemics in the past to rely on, even going back to 1918, is a system of identifying those who are infected, who they've come in contact to, and a way to isolate those folks who have come in contact with somebody who's been infected. It's really the only way, pending the vaccine, that we have in order to mitigate in a very strong way and build on what we've done so far in terms of flattening the curve of infection that we've seen happen pretty well here in the state of Pennsylvania, and certainly here in Western Pennsylvania. We never saw the kind of flare-up that we saw in the Southeast, but I think the governor, Department of Health have handled this very effectively. But in order to go through this next process, as you know, we've moved from this red to yellow. We want to certainly move to a green stage where we can have a more robust reopening. We need to have a sustainable system, a public health infrastructure that is going to be able to support reopening and giving people the confidence that they need to participate, whether it's in the workforce or whether it's as consumers.
Yeah, I mean, confidence is really what it's all about at this point in time. So we appreciate any kind of accommodations and ways that we can figure out how to get back to work. In the tech ecosystem, for those of us who can work remotely, we've seen a rapid transformation in terms of the possibilities there, in terms of work from home and
yeah. And I would say that this whole issue, I mean, to support that, I mean, this public health infrastructure that we need to build. I mean, when you take Pennsylvania, has one of the lowest per capita investments in public health in the entire country. We spend $15 per capita on public health. Back about 15 years ago, we were spending $30 per capita. It's been an impact in terms of our, I think, unwillingness to make the investments to basically close our eyes to the possibility, I think as much as this country did, and certainly Washington did, to the possibility of what many public health experts thought was an inevitability, which was a pandemic like the one that we're facing today. So we were not prepared on many levels. The public health infrastructure is not just getting the personnel engaged that you need, but you also need, obviously, access to testing on demand as well. You need access to PPE, and it's just quite startling that this country and our state, we're unprepared for what we're facing today.
Well, the good news is that Secretary Levine actually joined us about a month ago, maybe a month ago. I can't even remember anymore, but on the show to give us her update. And that was really at the onset of these different levels, red, yellow, and green. So we really appreciate her taking the time with us, given all that she has on her plate. I think there's a question though, Ryan. Is there a question about?
There is. It's Judy Mikeson has a question. So with the talk of us perhaps moving to the green zone, what would that entail while we still don't have possibly accurate testing and treatment and a vaccine available?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be, looking at guidance, some of it's evolving as we speak. I've seen guidance that says that they're going to limit meetings to 250 people or, communities. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Quite frankly, I've been having conversations with some of our institutions in Pittsburgh about how they reopen, particularly in the cultural community. Who are really anxious to get underway. So I've had conversations with the Carnegie Museums who have a plan, I think, that might work within the green phase that would incorporate social distancing within their ability to be able to now open up and allow the community to visit their venues. Had a conversation this morning with the City Theater. who are looking at ways to accommodate hopefully an audience in some way in a green phase doing the social distancing. But these things, even when you get to the green phase, create really enormous challenges. If you tell a cultural institution like the City Theater, the Public Theater, any of the cultural institutions downtown, the Symphony, that you're going to be operating at 50% capacity, it creates, I think, maintains significant financial challenges for these institutions. So the green phase, the guidance is still evolving around that, but you're looking at things like 50% of your usual audience being able to participate, looking at congregations of people, 250 people, and looking at how you maintain social distancing in that type of environment, whether it's a meeting, a convention, a social gathering, I think is still not clear as we discuss what the guidance will be as we move into the green phase.
So one of the things, we're wrapping up the school year for those who have kids that are in school, particularly in K through 12. We're wrapping up the school year within a few days. I believe for many, this is the last week of school, or if not next week. And now we're thinking about the summer, but then we're thinking about back to school. What does it mean? And I think a lot of families are just totally immersed in understanding education, what their options are, what they should be thinking about, et cetera. Do you think that there's hope that school will be resumed in the fall?
I think there is hope that there won't be school resumed in the fall, but it won't be resuming the way it typically does every fall. I think they're looking at strategies now of how maybe to stagger the day in a way that you don't have full classrooms, that the kids come in at different points of the day, maybe extending the school year. I think there are many different strategies that are being looked at as well, including some continuation of remote learning at some level, but hopefully not as not the entire answer to the question. And
right.
I think we need to get it is not talking to my staff who have young children who are in elementary school and high school. The challenges that families are facing. Working at home, if they're fortunate enough to be working at home, and trying to educate their children, something that they were never really, schooled in, is an enormous challenge. So I think opening up the schools is essential for, a better learning environment for our children. And I think it's also essential in terms of getting people back to work and reopening the economy, because if you can't, rely on your schools for your children to be there and be safe there, it's very hard to be able to work, and not everybody can work remotely, quite frankly, that we can move forward.
All right. I mean, school is both digital and what they call kinesthetic. People have to engage physically.
Yeah. And I've been engaging with teachers both personally and they are our teachers in our public schools, and I'm sure in our private schools, are enormously. This has been such a challenge for them, and I think that they are dedicated, but I know many of them are absolutely exhausted. That they are trying to give the individual attention that they can to many of the kids. We have many children who still, the Pittsburgh Public Schools is working hard to get the technology out there for everybody, but not everybody has technology at home. And some people who have one computer, one laptop at home, need it for work. You have 5 people trying to share it. It is not a very conducive environment for learning and socializing and so forth. So we need to get kids back to school.
Right. And so, Ryan, I think there's another question.
There is. David Kerr is asking if you could comment at all on the governor's proposed civilian coronavirus corps, and if there's a role for the private sector or the tech community to play in that.
Well, absolutely. One of the things, and I had introduced some legislation about trying to do that. Fundamentally, we need hundreds, if not thousands, of public health workers. As I said, we have to go from, detecting who's infected, be able to interview them. You need public health people who are qualified, particularly under HIPAA, to be able to interview somebody who's been infected, find out who they've been, where they've been, who they may have been in contact with, and then you need another level of public health workers that do the contact tracing. In Massachusetts, they've hired, I think, 1,000 contact tracers and 500 investigators. I'm not sure exactly what the metrics are here, but we do not have that workforce in place right now. So I know the administration is looking through the Department of Health. We have some folks here. We have nurse practitioners. We're looking at community organizations to do the training. Contact tracing is not a low-skilled job. It takes significant interpersonal skill in order to be able to interview somebody, and also it's not just being able to interview somebody that's been identified to have been in contact, but you've got to persuade that person to quarantine themselves, and we need to give them the tools. So as we look at building this public health workforce, I think it's really important that we broaden the net. We need to look at not just people who are currently in the healthcare realm, that work at hospitals and so forth, but we need to find people in communities that are going to be trusted by those communities. So I think it's important that we partner with organizations like Casa San Jose that deals with the immigrant community in Western Pennsylvania. We need to look at folks in Black churches and lead people in rural churches that we can train that are trusted in their community to do the contact tracing. If somebody comes to you, in a white, doctor, the physician's uniform, or that you have no idea comes from the city, and you're out in a rural area, you're probably much less likely to confide details that we need to find out, and then to be persuaded to isolate yourself. So as we do this, I've been urging the administration to look at diversifying that workforce in order to do this effectively. And I think that's what they're doing in Massachusetts. We don't have to build this. I mean, Massachusetts is looking at that as well. One of the problems we have in the state of Pennsylvania is a kind of a patchwork of public health resources. So we have 11 counties and municipalities that have their own departments of health. So they have a basis. And here in Allegheny County, we're fortunate enough to have a really very effective health department, but it is not staffed at the level that you need to be staffed at in order to do this effective investigation and tracing that we're going to need. And we need to deal with all the communities and counties and municipalities across the state that don't have those resources. So we have an enormous task in front of us to build that workforce. But I think there are really opportunities. A lot of people, we have a lot of young people who graduated from college that I think want to be employed and want to do something that is meaningful. And I think this is one area that we can have some success in recruiting folks to do this work.
So we have a couple of statements, and then just I guess one additional question about restaurants, as well as any kind of financing in terms of support for equipment. I'd like to address some of those statements, Ryan, but I also want to, after this, start to talk to him about some other things around talent.
Right. So Grant Scorsone from a member company, ICAM Architects, also owns Spoonwood Brewing, and he, like many restaurateurs, are saying at the 50% occupancy, that is a money-losing proposition for most restaurant owners. Are there any plans in place to specifically target those types of businesses to help them sustain themselves throughout this?
Well, the resources that we're looking at, really come from the federal level that we have the opportunity to distribute. I mean, for instance, we have about $20 million from the CDC to help the state to build its public health workforce. I get the issue about operating at 50% for any business, is in many cases a non-starter. I don't have a real good answer for that, because if you have interior in-restaurant dining inside, which you need to have obviously if you're operating a restaurant 12 months a year, you've got to hire the same folks that you need to fill it for a full restaurant as you do for a half a full restaurant. So I think we still have some work to do in terms of how we move forward with that. And I think we're going to have to rely on some resources from the federal government. We're dealing with, we may get into this later, a state budget that is in front of us right now that is a very dire environment in terms of a budget deficit of enormous proportions, unprecedented historical deficit. We have municipal governments, county governments that are in the same situation with tax revenues down drastically. So the resources that we need to address small business need to be really targeted at the federal level, and to be able to understand that, we can't really assure people they're going to be safe. And I don't think people are going to want to go to a restaurant that is crowded at the bar and full at every table and people waiting to be seated. That's probably a non-starter as well. So anyway,
we have a couple who have actually said they would like to partner on the contact tracing and community organizations. Can we link them to you after this call?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That would be great. I want to ask a question. In the tech community, while we've all been severely impacted by this, we also have huge amounts of opportunities for jobs. And we actually ran a virtual job fair yesterday and had over, 1,100 applicants, and across 35 companies. And of course, that Zoom is planned to open up an office here. We had the CIO of Zoom on yesterday. So as we look to address our talent challenges, talent is really the heart of all of our efforts. And you have been working on legislation to help ensure that diverse people feel welcomed and protected in Pennsylvania. And I want to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Tech Council and the Pittsburgh business community generally for supporting efforts to basically create an environment in Pennsylvania that embraces its diversity and it supports people, no matter what their race, religion, sexual orientation is. One of the problems we have in Pennsylvania, and this is something I've been working on in my 20 years since I walked in the door here, is to address, I think, one of the most glaring deficiencies that we have, and an embarrassment, quite frankly, for the state of Pennsylvania, that we do not provide civil rights protections for people on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. We are the only state in the northeastern quadrant of this country that doesn't provide those protections. So we currently have a Pennsylvania Human Relations Act that provides civil rights protections, anti-discrimination protections for people on the basis of their race, their religion, their nationality, their gender, their age. It does not include the category for sexual orientation, gender identity, expression. So in Pennsylvania, you can fire somebody for being part of the LGBTQ community. You can deny them housing. You can deny them access to public education, to private education. You can deny them access to public accommodations. And that, I think, in particular in a world, when I talk to particularly young people about this, they can't believe that that's the case. And I think obviously, I think you've encountered this in the tech community because you have an extraordinarily diverse, well-educated workforce and in terms of recruiting people. And I think people want to locate, they want to work in an environment that embraces diversity and tolerance. And we can't say that about our state. So I wish I could tell you that we were close to getting this done, but I've been introducing this bill. We have about 90 co-sponsors out of the 203 members of the Pennsylvania House and about half of the Pennsylvania Senate. It is barely bipartisan, but almost entirely supported by Democrats with a handful of Republicans in the state who've done that. Now, there is some hope because, as I think I mentioned to you earlier, I'm also working on a package of hate crimes bills that embraces protecting people from the LGBTQ community who are targets of hate crimes, the hate crimes that we've seen in our community. And I have broad consensus about that from the religious community and folks that represent more conservative proclivities with respect to civil rights, but maybe have been able to differentiate the hate crimes. And I think if we can get that done, if we can adopt a package of hate crimes that protects all Pennsylvanians, including those in the LGBTQ community, against acts of hate, I think that'll be a big step forward. And I do have bipartisan support, and I do have some unlikely groups that have been in opposition in the past to come on board. So I'm hoping we got sidetracked on this with the pandemic. We were on the verge of having some significant movement on this, but it's kind of been put on the back burner.
Do you think, let's switching back for just 1 second, and thank you for your work there. That deeply matters to us. Do you think that there's anything that on the federal or state or municipal level that there'll be a next round of funding of help in Washington in terms of the impact that COVID has had on businesses?
Yes, well, I think most of the, as I said, the funding issues are going to have to be generated in Washington. We obviously see, disagreement between the Republican majority in the Senate and the Democratic majority in the House. I think there's general agreement that something more needs to be done, particularly around small business. And I think as people, as businesses communicate, like with this conversation we had about restaurants, I mean, it's not really practical to reopen when you can at best accommodate 50% of your usual capacity. It's just the numbers don't work. But maybe if you have resources to carry you through until we have a vaccine, where you can open up safely and you can give people confidence that they come to your restaurant or your business safely, that would tide us over. So I think we need to buy some time. And everything about what we've been doing, the mitigation, the resources that we receive from Washington, is all about buying time until we get to that place where we can nearly guarantee people that they'll be safe.
I know, it's big. I think there's one last question, Ryan.
Michael Onilo is asking if you think that the shift to voting by mail in response to the pandemic is something that you might see continued in Pennsylvania.
Yes, well, we actually enabled this before the pandemic. So we passed legislation, last year that enabled vote by mail and no excuse absentee ballot voting. So this was already in place. It's not something we did in response to the pandemic, and many states have moved in this. So this primary will be the first opportunity to see how that plays out. In addition to which, because of the pandemic, the county has limited the number of polling places. So I think people have been encouraged in an aggressive way to participate by mail. I know that the county sent out applications to every voter in Allegheny County. I don't know if that's being done in every county across Pennsylvania, but I think that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing play out. We'll see how long it takes to count the ballots. I mean, some people say we're not going to know on election night exactly what happens. But I'm told when I talk to the county executive, Richard Sherrill, that they have scanners and that we should be able to get election results that evening.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time for all of us. I'm personally very interested in when I can get my hair colored again. So, that's as
well. I haven't had this look since
I was going to say something. I was going to say something, and then you can see Ryan on our team is now adorning a beard. Yes, we have lots of that. But my hat's off to you for the work that you're doing on behalf of our entire community to make sure that we really are diverse and inclusive, as well as the work in contact tracing and everything else. So please stay safe. We will stay in contact with you. And is it okay? We will give out to remind people about your contact information if they have further questions, because there were a few that we didn't quite get to. So on that note, everyone stay safe. Have a great day. We jump right into our virtual STEM Summit, which is 7 days of engaging students and teachers. We have hundreds and hundreds of people that are joining us, and that kicks off at 1 o'clock today. So
good luck with that.
It's really great. We're really excited. Sure. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow, same place.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.